I think it's very particular to human beings that we could complain about the summer and then the fall comes and we complain about how quickly time is moving, and very soon we'll be complaining about the winter. Now, you may not be a complaining kind of person, and maybe that doesn't include you, but I think many people sort of look at the changes in life as threatening to them. These times are called sometimes liminal periods in the climate, liminal periods in the environment, liminal periods in our life. Liminal meaning limits of one paradigm have come up against another. It's like a segue from one way of thinking to another way of thinking. And that could be very kind of exciting, I think, but it also can be threatening. And we could take any opportunity for change as an opportunity to become fearful. And when we're fearful, we shut down and close down a lot of the time. I mean, there are a lot of different reactions that we have. And even if people are more outward in their relationship to fear, like explosive temperaments, etc., it comes from an internal pressurization, which comes from a clamping down inside. The fear that we experience environmentally, ecologically, in our life, and in our world really comes from this feeling that we need to control our experience in order to be safe. Well, good luck to that. That's an age-old game that has been played by human beings, I think probably since we've been human beings. We thought that we could pray to the gods in the sky, ancient persons. We felt like we could make offerings to certain gods in the systems. We felt like if we accumulated wealth, we'd be above any of the pain or the vicissitudes of life. Throughout all of time, humans have tried to control their world in order to feel more comfortable about things changing. Well, there's three ways that we control our world quite effectively. The most effective way altogether is to reduce the size of the world. So we can reduce our world down to a very small space that then we can control, you know? I think that a lot of us have experienced that during the COVID thing. We've all been a little bit like our own tea party people, you know, having this imaginary tea party, and you have this amount of tea and you have that, and you sit here and you sit there. And we organize our life in such a way that it's really quite OCD like, right? But it's very small. It doesn't really invite other people in. It doesn't invite the possibility of chaos, which for people who are creative, artists in particular, chaos is the fertile ground that we all look for. And yet it's the very thing that we all abhor, right? It's like, in a way, we don't want chaos because it's something we can't control. By definition, I think that's what chaos is. It's a label that we slap on change that happens too quickly for us to administer it and be in control of it. Chaos can be regarded as extremely good news, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche told his students back in the 70s, much to their shock and maybe even to their dismay a little bit. That the idea of the rug being pulled out from under us was considered for people seriously on the path of meditation to be extremely good news. It's like life is waking us up and forcing us to be spontaneous and present. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because if we control our world by reducing it down to a small space, we will suffer for that. And I think we've all felt that. We've all woken up some days wondering why we're in such a limited life. I pulled a quote from the post that I wrote for this class. And the pull quote was, "The greatest tragedies many of us will face in life may not be the painful times that will certainly happen to all of us, but rather the possibilities that because of our fear, we will never allow to happen. You see, it's not the things we're frightened of that is a real tragedy in life. It's the things we've never seen before, that we may never see because we're too frightened to look out the window, we're too frightened to lift our gaze, we're too frightened to look beyond the confines of our own fear-based existence and to allow sunlight in. But sunlight means maybe chaos. It means the sounds of the traffic and or the sounds of emergency vehicles. It means that everything isn't as clean and perfect as we might want it to be. There's a small part of our mind. I say small because basically, you know, in relationship to the huge expanse of possibility in our mental capacity, there is a tiny subset of the mind that is driven by fear. I like to call it the trauma mind. And a lot of that fear comes from a history of trauma, which is embedded in our body. And that kind of fear-based trauma mind is constantly trying to assert its dominance over a world that it sees as very fearful, and for good reason, because it's experienced pain. One of the strangest ways that we try to control our experience, and this is the second way, along with reducing our life, is to actually re-inflict the trauma. It's like as if we could prove that we could hurt ourselves the way we were hurt again and again and somehow gain some kind of control over that process. Like that gives us some kind of mastery. I could treat myself poorly because the world has treated me poorly. And to some extent, it's a learned experience. We learn something, and so we keep doing it. And because we keep doing it, and this comes to the third form of the ways that we control things, is through repetition ad nauseum. We just keep doing it and doing it and doing it, performing the same experiment and expecting different results, which is sometimes posited as the definition of insanity. But we think something else is going to happen than what is actually happening, no matter how many times we've seen it happen. We just keep doing it because we feel in control that way. We reduce our world, we re-inflict the trauma that caused the pain and suffering, and we do the same patterned experiences again and again and again. And what this does is it keeps us ensconced in this small world that the small mind creates. And Trungpa Rinpoche talked about the idea of a cocoon, this cotton batting almost that we weave around our life to protect us. But unfortunately, the cocoon also keeps us from joy. You see, as we limit our life because of fear, we also limit our potential to experience great joy. I don't believe that you can really fall in love truly and completely and not open yourself up to great pain and sadness. I don't believe that we can take great risks in our life and not open ourselves up to danger. Now, one of the ways that we control things, this is going to be a complete, almost seeming contradiction to what I just said, is by this crazy, reactive, unsafe behavior. That's a methodology that many people who grew up in dysfunctional environments have. They feel like they have to threaten the odds constantly by proving that they could jump out of planes or scale tall buildings, act like superheroes, constantly defying death and looking in the face. But is that a sane and meditative way to live? And ultimately, even though it's an expression of fearlessness, is it a way to really connect to serenity, which I believe lies at the basis of all our good decisions? I think that we could make a binary depiction here and look at our life as a series of good and not so good decisions, right? My guess is for most of us, when we've made those positive choices, they've come from a mind that was open and balanced and serene. And when we made negative choices, they came from a mind that was broken and uneven and not really resting within itself. In psychology, sometimes they posit the difference in the activities that stem from these two minds as responding or reacting. So when we have a serene, balanced state of mind, we're open, we see more options in our life, we're able to respond. And sometimes they say count to 3, sometimes count to 10, but it's all about creating enough of a gap that we're not reacting out of the spasm of our tortured mind, but we're finding our way to the balance of the serenity. And that serene mind of confidence, compassion, and contentment allows us to make choices that are healthy for ourselves and helpful to other people. When, on the other hand, we just react out of fear and out of this combustion internally that comes from reducing our mind down to this small, small space, that reaction is almost always, and certainly in my experience, always negative. It leads to poor karmic consequences, which means to say that we create circumstances that create more suffering for ourselves. How can we create circumstances that alleviate our suffering and put us into a better possibility of actually being a benefit to the people around us, which is an incredibly rewarding and healing approach to take to life, as opposed to how we could make it all about me and try to get more and try to push away the things we don't want and hoard the things we do want and basically just react to this damage that we've inherited from our past. I say, why don't we just drop that? Just drop it and come back into connection to our own basic fundamental goodness. In the Shambhala teachings with which I was brought up, we have this idea that each of us is fundamentally good and fundamentally sound. But we stop believing in it. We start believing what the world is telling us. We stop believing that we are enough and start believing that we're not enough and we need more and we need to compete with other people and we need to create situations that are competitive and combative and restrictive in our own mind, constantly trying to control our experience because of fear. The Shambhala teachings tell us that fear is not the problem, that fear can shut you down and create the mind which creates the problem. Or it could be a reminder to open up. I'm frightened, therefore I'll open up. Does that sound crazy? Does it? Think about it for a moment. If you're actually in danger, what's a better way to defend yourself? To become tense, myopic, and blame oriented, or to actually open up, relax, and begin to see what's actually happening in your life? Awareness is the basic power that allows us to protect ourselves, allows us to thrive in our life. But that awareness has to come from that mind of serenity, that mind of openness. If we freak out and we create this small world that we need to be in charge of and control, like a little personal Hitler in our own mind, then the only option we have is to lash out and react and create violence in our world, which only creates more discordance and difficulty. We can retrain ourselves. That's the key. And that's an aspect of meditation that I don't think it's talked about enough, that to some extent we are retraining the mind. We're telling the mind that the way you've been doing it, okay, has been fine. We've made it this far, but we can do better. We could actually do better. And we could actually stop reacting and keeping that little me part of the brain from trying to control, truncate, and repetitionalize our life over and over again. We could actually put that aside, touch our wounded and vulnerable heart, and have the bravery to just be present with ourselves and simple with our responses to life, right? So one way we could deal with change is to maybe grow, to adapt, as all of life has done since the history of the life that we understand began. It has evolved, it has developed, it has adapted, it has faced adversity and found ways to work with the adversity. Humans, on the other hand, face adversity and just burrow into our habit patterns and think that that's somehow protected. It's like the ostrich approach, only we do it with these habit patterns. Well, I'll just get drunk. I'll get drunk every day at 5 o'clock, and that'll make it better. But it never makes it better. Nothing can make it better. As long as we're coming from the affliction known technically as the screaming memes. Me. I'm worried about me. I'm worried about me. I'm trying to fix me. I got to make me better. And as long as we're doing that, we're creating a world that's very, very small. The alternative is to breathe out, accept who we are, come back to the present moment, and open our heart to our experience right now and open that up beyond right now. Well, that and absolutely consistent, everyday, consistent meditation practice, because it's the consistency of a daily meditation practice that makes the changes inside. Changes us away from the kind of insanity that's actually suicidal for ourselves, our societies, and our cultures, toward maybe an open and more connected and cooperative way to be.